My dad told me I wasn't invited to my own mom's retirement cruise. It's more about your sister now, he said. Vincent just landed a big gallery role, and they're announcing their engagement. I didn't argue. I just took Vincent's grand application off my desk. And during their little celebration, my full name and title appeared on the screen. Vincent turned pale. The next morning, he emailed us, begging for another chance. The call came on a Monday. I was halfway through my second espresso, reviewing partnership updates from our Zurich team, when my phone buzzed with my father's name. I answered, expecting the usual gruff pleasantries, or maybe a question about stock markets he didn't really understand. Instead, I got, "Leon, I think it's best if you sit this one out." I blinked. "Sit what out?" "The cruise," he said. "Your mother's retirement cruise. We just think, with everything going on, it's probably better if you skip it." I didn't respond right away. Just sat there, staring at the art catalog open in front of me, the bold black and white photo of a Sudanese textile exhibit suddenly meaningless. "Alina and Vincent are coming," he added, as if that explained everything. "And Vincent's career is really taking off now. It's a good time to let them be the focus." My throat dried. "You mean her boyfriend?" "Lead curator, Leon. He just got the position at that gallery in Vienna. It's a huge deal." "Of course. Vincent. The family's new prize." "Right?" I said, keeping my tone even. "Big deal." There was a pause. I imagined him shifting in his leather chair, trying to sound thoughtful when really, he was just tired of pretending to care. "This doesn't mean we don't love you. Just give your sister this one." I forced a smile he couldn't see. "Sure, Dad. Give her this one." We hung up. I didn't even feel the phone leave my hand. I just sat there, letting the silence build, listening to the hum of the office AC and the faint click of my assistant typing outside. Then I opened my desk drawer. Inside was the folder. I slid it out slowly, flipping it open with clinical precision. There it was, Vincent's grant application. The same one he'd submitted under a slightly tweaked version of his name. Vincent E. Thorne. He'd listed Alina as a personal reference. Amateur move. The proposal was vague, full of buzzwords. Disruption. Decolonize the gaze. Reimagine artistic borders. No real plan. No real depth. The only reason it had reached the final round was because of his connection to Alina, and even that couldn't save it. I was the one who made the final call. Leonard Wickham. That's the name he saw on the rejection letter. He had no idea I was Leon, the son Alina never mentioned when name-dropping my foundation. I tapped the corner of the folder on the desk, aligning the edges neatly. Then I slid it back into the drawer. Locked it. Let them have their cruise. Let them toast Vincent and his new title and his imaginary success. Let them parade him around the ship like he was the second coming of Basquiat. Because none of them knew what I knew. And I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. But I would. 3 days before that phone call, I sat across from Vincent Thorne in the walnut-paneled conference room of the Wickham Cultural Foundation. He didn't know who I was. To him, I was Dr. Leonard Wickham, head of our grants and residency program, a name I always used for formal evaluations. On paper, I was just another panelist, albeit the final one. He entered the room wearing an intentionally rumpled linen shirt and a blazer with frayed elbow patches, like he was trying to cosplay as an artsy intellectual. He gave a cocky little smile, the kind that probably worked wonders on donors at cocktail events. "Dr. Wickham," he said, extending his hand. "It's an honor." I shook it briefly. "Please, have a seat." He dropped into the chair, legs crossed, posture relaxed, too relaxed. I watched him glance at the boardroom table, the awards lining the wall, the discreet recording mic perched beside the water pitcher. He probably thought he was already in. "Tell me," I said, flipping to the cover page of his proposal, "how do you believe your project contributes to the cultural ecosystem of underrepresented artists?" He smiled, like he'd been waiting for the question. "Well, I think it's about challenging the dominant narrative, you know? Like, creating a space where marginalized voices can thrive. Deconstructing structures. Giving people a platform." I didn't react. "Could you specify what methods you plan to use to engage those communities?" He blinked. "Sure, yeah. We'll be doing workshops. Interactive ones. And there'll be, like, some open calls. To make it democratic." I nodded, slowly. "How will you fund those workshops?" He looked puzzled for a second, like he hadn't thought that far. "Through the grant," he said. "Mostly. There's no line item for that in your budget." He frowned. "I guess I didn't break it down in that much detail yet. But the idea is flexible. Organic." I held my pen just above the paper. "You mention in your application that your work challenges Eurocentric curatorial hierarchies. How does your current position at the Landesmuseum in Vienna align with that?" He blinked again. "Well, it's symbolic. Me being there. Changing it from within. Yet your curatorial focus there is on 20th century Western sculpture." He shifted. "That's just temporary. My real passion is in the contemporary space." "And your thesis?" I asked. The one listed in your application, a visual archive of urban displacement, is that available publicly? He cleared his throat. It's still in development, but you submitted it as completed. A beat passed. He smiled again, but it faltered this time. I guess it's a living project, constantly evolving. Of course. I smiled politely and closed the folder. Thank you for your time, Mr. Thorne. We'll be in touch within 72 hours. He stood up, still grinning, and shook my hand with the same easy arrogance he walked in with. I really appreciate the opportunity, he said. And I think we're going to do great things together. He left the room confident, probably texting Alina as soon as the elevator doors closed. I imagined him writing something smug like, crushed it. The board loved me. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already flagged his application with a soft decline before the interview even began. But I'd wanted to hear it from his own mouth. I sat alone for a few minutes after he left, tapping my pen against the table. Vincent wasn't just unqualified. He was a fraud with a gift for performance and a complete lack of substance. And now, thanks to my own signature, he would never get another dime from our foundation again. Let them celebrate him. Let them brag about the lead curator. I had other plans. The night of the cruise dinner, I wasn't there. I was supposed to be. Technically, I had my name on the guest manifest, the same way you leave a light on in an empty house, just in case. But after Dad's call, after being disinvited like some awkward coworker who wasn't quite part of the team, I decided to stay put in Chicago. Still, Alina had insisted I join for a toast via video. It would mean a lot to Mom, she'd said in her last message. Just for dessert. That's all. So I agreed. I knew exactly what I was walking into. I even cleared my evening schedule, sitting in my office with a neat drink and my laptop open on Zoom, waiting for the screen to flicker from black to image. When it did, the view was surreal. The whole family was gathered in the ship's private dining room, gold light, clinking forks, the kind of backdrop you'd see in an ad for retirement savings. There was Mom, her silver hair swept back, looking elegant in navy chiffon. Dad beside her, his arm draped lazily over his chair. Alina was glowing, her tan sharpened by the warm lighting, and next to her sat Vincent, all smiles and a white button-down, sleeves casually rolled. Leon. Mom's voice cut through the buzz. There he is. Hey, Ma. I smiled. Happy retirement. Everyone raised a glass. Toast had already happened, apparently, but Alina made a big show of unmuting the laptop and turning the camera so I had a full view of the table. We just had to get you on, she said. Even if you're too busy being mysterious and important. Vincent chuckled beside her. Yeah, Dr. Wickham, he said, mocking with a wink. Wherever you were tonight. I smiled and said nothing. Just watched. Dessert had just been served, tiny layered cakes in glass jars, when Vincent started talking, loud enough for everyone to hear. So, he said, dabbing the corner of his mouth with a napkin. A bit of exciting news. I got confirmation today that I'll be working directly with two of Europe's biggest arts funders next quarter. Oh well, Mom said, eyes wide. That's wonderful. Congratulations, Dad added, already half checked out. Vincent grinned. One of them is actually the Wickham Cultural Foundation. We're doing some cross-institutional work. Very hush-hush, but it's happening. I tilted my head slightly. Isn't that the same foundation you applied to last month? Alina asked, smiling with pride. Yeah, he said quickly. Totally unrelated, though. Different division. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was a Slack notification from our European programs team. I hadn't muted the call on purpose, so the buzz came through the speaker. Then another sound, clearer, a knock on my office door. Come in, I said without turning off the camera. It was Marin, one of our senior directors. She poked her head in, clearly unaware I was still on the call. Hey, sorry to interrupt, quick question about the Thorne rejection. We need a clarification for the records. Do you have a moment, Dr. Wickham? Silence. Complete and utter silence from the video feed. I looked up at Marin and nodded. Give me 1 minute. But it was too late. I saw it happen in real time, the way Vincent's smirk faltered, the blood draining from his face. Dr. Wickham? Alina repeated slowly, turning to look at him, then back at the screen. I raised my glass slightly. Good to see you all. And then I ended the call. The last thing I saw was Vincent's jaw tightening, his hands frozen on the tablecloth. Alina was staring at the laptop like it had just come alive. Let them chew on that with their desserts. Let them wonder who they'd just toasted. By the next morning, my phone was a war zone. Missed calls. Voicemails. Text from numbers I hadn't saved. Alina, Dad, even Vincent, though he had the nerve to hide behind some neutral email signature like V. Thorne, Cultural Strategy. That one made me laugh. The first voicemail was from Alina. Her voice was sharp at first, demanding, defensive, but near the end, it cracked. You could have just told me, she said. You made me look like an idiot. Then came Dad's message, short and gruff. This isn't how you handle things. You blindsided your sister. Your mother's party was not the place. Like he hadn't been the one to say, give her this one. I let them pile up. Didn't listen to the rest. I opened Vincent's email only long enough to see the subject line, misunderstanding, can we talk? And then forwarded it to our HR team. Block him from any future application cycles, I typed. Immediately. No further explanation. No calls. No replies. Until Mom. Her name lit up my screen just after noon. I hesitated, then answered. She didn't start with a question. No apology, either. Just said, I'm proud of you. I said nothing. The words hit me in a place I didn't know was still sore. I didn't know about the foundation, she continued. Or your position. The board, the work. I've been looking it up all morning. You've built something. Serious. Important. I swallowed hard. It's not a secret. No, she said softly. But we never asked. There was a pause, one that didn't feel heavy, just quiet. Like something old and rusted had finally been set down. I'd like to come visit, she said. The gallery. The foundation. All of it. If that's okay. My chest tightened. I wasn't sure if it was relief or resentment. Maybe both. Yeah, I said finally. Yeah, I'd like that. She didn't gush or fill the silence with excuses. Just let it hang there. I'll call you next week, she said. And thank you for showing up, even from far away. After we hung up, I sat still for a long time, letting the weight settle in. The fallout was still happening. I knew that. Dad would be doubling down. Alina, spiraling. Vincent, probably scrambling to rewrite his origin story. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to defend anything. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of the laptop. Not Leonard Wickham, not the foundation head. Just Leon. And for once, that was enough. It was Friday when my father showed up. No call. No warning. Just the quiet ding of the elevator and the sudden presence of him in our glass-walled lobby, looking out of place in his beige windbreaker and loafers, like he'd wandered into a museum by accident. I watched from my office for a moment, arms folded. He stood frozen, eyes scanning the atrium, wide skylights, steel beams, and a rotating installation of community art funded by our refugee artist grant. It was a space meant to feel like possibility. To him, it probably felt foreign. Finally, he spotted me and gave a slight wave. I buzzed my assistant and told her to let him in. Dad, I said, as he walked through the door. Didn't expect you. Didn't think I'd need an invitation, he muttered. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Well, you're here. He didn't sit. Just walked slowly around the office, running his fingers along the edge of the bookshelves, pausing at the framed photo of our first grantee cohort. Didn't realize this place was so big. It is, I said simply. He turned to face me. All this time, you never mentioned you ran the Wickham Foundation. I did. You didn't ask. That hit him harder than he let on. He dropped into the chair finally, sighing as if the weight of the building itself had settled on his shoulders. You made a scene on that call, he said. I leaned back, letting him try. I was invited for dessert, remember? He had the nerve to chuckle. Fair enough. There was a long pause. He looked down at his hands, folded tightly. Vincent said he didn't know you were on the panel. He didn't, I said. I use my formal name for evaluations. Keeps things clean. He nodded slowly. Still, rejecting him personally? That wasn't necessary. He wasn't qualified, Dad. He lied on his application. He tried to manipulate the process. Dad flinched. Alina didn't know. I'm aware. He looked up at me then. I sharp. You always had a chip on your shoulder. Always waiting for a chance to prove you were better. And you were always waiting for a chance to remind me I wasn't. That shut him up. I stood and walked to the window, hands in my pockets. You believed everything Vincent told you without question. Called him impressive. Visionary. You barely blinked when I got my doctorate. That's not true. It is, I said calmly. You praised a man you barely knew because he looked the part. You didn't even recognize my name when it showed up on a building. His face went red. You've never exactly made it easy. I turned to him. Neither did you. But here I am. He looked down again. I guess I just didn't understand what you were doing. This art stuff, it all felt so removed. It isn't, I said. Every piece on this floor came from people who needed a voice. The job is giving them one. He nodded once, then again, like he was trying to catch up to a story that had been playing the whole time without him. I saw the exhibit downstairs, he said. The one with the fabric portraits? Syrian women in resettlement camps. One of our most impactful partnerships. He didn't reply, just stared at the floor for a while. Finally, he stood. I'll leave you to it. I walked him to the door. As he paused in the threshold, he looked back over his shoulder. Leon. I waited. I guess I didn't see what you built. I do now. Then he left. I watched him disappear down the corridor, past the glass cases, the donor plaques, the work he never bothered to look at. And for the first time, he had nothing to say. The email came in just after midnight. I almost didn't see it. It was from a small consultancy based out of Amsterdam, one of our lesser-known partners, specialists in grant ethics and applicant audits. I'd reached out after something in Vincent's application didn't sit right. Something about his credentials, his portfolio timeline, it all felt stitched together. The subject line read, Confidential, Thorn Investigation Summary. I clicked. It was worse than I thought. Vincent had falsified major parts of his CV. He'd listed exhibitions that never happened, awards that didn't exist, and one residency that had been terminated early due to professional misconduct, though the details were vague. The consultants noted that several of his supposed collaborators had never heard of him. And the kicker? He had applied to over a dozen different funding bodies using slight variations of his resume, tweaking names, dates, even entire projects, to avoid detection. He'd been playing the system, gaming it, using Alina as a backdoor. I sat there, blinking at the screen, the late-night quiet pressing in on me like a weight. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was anger and guilt, because Alina had no idea. Until the next morning, when she called me sobbing. I answered immediately. She never cried. Not with me. Leon, she choked out. I didn't know. My chest tightened. What happened? He told me this morning. Said he thought it didn't matter, that it was just how the art world worked. And then I found the email. From your foundation. She paused, trying to catch her breath. He knew. He knew who you were. Months ago. Said if he played it right, you'd be our in. That you'd come around eventually. My stomach dropped. He told you that. He bragged about it. Said he was building long-term proximity. That's what he called it. I closed my eyes. And I let it happen, she said, voice cracking. I let him pull me away from you. I let myself believe that your silence meant you didn't care. I sat back in my chair, pinching the bridge of my nose. Alina. No, don't, she whispered. I need to say this. I've been awful to you. I let him twist things. I let him turn me into someone I don't even recognize. She started crying again, and I just listened, because there wasn't anything else to do. He's gone, she finally said. Packed a bag and left. Said he had meetings in Berlin. I don't even know if that's true. There was a long silence. Then she added, almost as an afterthought. I think I wanted him to be you. That one hit like a knife. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't say it was okay. It wasn't. Not yet. But I didn't hang up either. And that, I think, was the start of something different. My mother showed up at the foundation on a Thursday. She didn't call ahead. Just walked in, clutching a worn purse and looking around like someone stepping into a cathedral for the first time. I spotted her from across the atrium and came down the glass staircase slowly, unsure how this would go. Hi, Ma, I said. She looked up at me and smiled, small, uncertain. This place is beautiful. Come on, I said. Let me show you around. I took her through everything. The West Wing Gallery first, where the current exhibition was a mixed media series from trans youth in Kansas. She lingered in front of one piece. Bold orange swirls, tiny sewn-on patches, a handwritten poem in the corner. She didn't say anything, but I saw the way her hand lifted slightly, almost as if she wanted to touch it. That's from Eli, I said quietly. He's 16, funded through our Youth Resilience Grant. She nodded slowly, her eyes still locked on the piece. It feels like it's breathing. We moved on. I introduced her to my team. Jenna from development, Miguel from programming. Everyone greeted her with warmth, offering little nods and smiles. She kept looking at me like she didn't recognize who I was. Not in a bad way. Just like she was meeting someone new, someone she'd missed. In the afternoon, I took her to a team huddle, our weekly check-in, nothing formal. The chairs were pulled into a loose circle in the community studio space, surrounded by unfinished canvases and stacks of zines. The air smelled like acrylic paint and fresh coffee. One of the artists, Rania, a Syrian photographer, had just wrapped a shoot for her Homeward series. She stood to thank the group and then turned to me. I wouldn't have been able to stay in this country without this foundation, she said. And you made that possible. Thank you, Leon. I nodded, a little embarrassed. The team made it possible. But when I glanced at my mother, her eyes were shining. Afterward, we sat in the rooftop garden, sharing a quiet coffee. The city stretched out in every direction, but it felt far away. She looked at me and wiped at her eyes. You always saw people, she said softly. I turned to her, unsure what to say. And now I see you, she added. Really see you. The knot I'd carried in my chest for years began to loosen, just a little. She reached over and took my hand. I'd like to come again sometime. If that's okay. I smiled. It's always okay. We sat like that for a long while. No big speech. No dramatic music. Just a mother seeing her son, maybe for the first time, and deciding to stay a little longer in his world. We met at a quiet little place near the river, Alina's choice. Not our usual family spots. Not the kind of sleek bistro Vincent used to drag her to. Just a warm, dim cafe with mismatched chairs and scratched wooden tables. The kind of place where no one rushed you to leave. She was already there when I arrived, a mug of untouched tea in front of her. Her eyes were puffy, makeup light. For once, She didn't look like she was performing for anyone. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. She looked up. "Hey." We sat in silence for a moment. The clink of dishes and distant hum of conversation filled the space between us. Then she spoke. "I always thought you had it figured out," she said quietly. "That you just didn't care what people thought." I raised an eyebrow. "That's funny. I spent most of my 20s thinking you were the one who never had to question anything." She smiled weakly. Maybe we were both just faking it. She took a slow sip of her tea and set the mug down with care. Vincent wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a story I could fit into. Someone who always had a plan, always had a script for where we were going next. It felt easier to follow that than to ask myself what I really wanted. I nodded. I'd seen that look before. In the mirror. In the faces of young artists trying to be someone else just to get noticed. "I've been thinking about leaving law," she said suddenly. "I hate it. I always have." That caught me off guard. "You're good at it." "I'm good at pretending," she said. "I don't even know who I am outside of someone else's expectations." I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. "What do you want to do?" She hesitated. "Something that matters." "I don't know. Maybe work with kids. Youth outreach. Underrepresented communities. I don't even care if it's glamorous. I just want it to feel real." I studied her face. She meant it. "You don't have to have it all figured out," I said. "But if you're serious, I can connect you to a few people. Give you some options. No pressure." Her eyes filled again, and she gave a small nod. "I'd like that." We sat there for a while longer, talking about nothing important. Childhood memories. Old cartoons. The year we tried to build a treehouse and gave up after 10 minutes. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some sweeping reconciliation. But it was honest. As we stood to leave, she hesitated. "Leon." "Yeah. I'm sorry for everything. Really. I didn't say it's okay. Because it wasn't. Not yet. But I did say, thank you." And that was enough for now. The auditorium was packed. It was alumni weekend at my old university. Brick walls, ivy-covered arches, the works. I hadn't been back in years. Not since graduation. Not since I sat in the back row of this very building while a tenured art history professor told us to pursue meaning. But remember, meaning doesn't pay your rent. Now, I was the keynote speaker. As I stepped up to the podium, the lights dimmed just slightly, and the rustle of jackets and shifting legs quieted to a still buzz. I took a breath. Not to calm myself. I was past nerves, but to steady the emotion that had started to creep in ever since I spotted them. Alina, sitting next to Mom. Front row, center. I adjusted the mic. "When I was a sophomore, I began. A visiting lecturer told me the arts were a luxury. That real careers meant business degrees, software engineering, law. I was told I was wasting my time." A few people chuckled. I spent the next decade trying to prove that wrong, not to them, to myself. And maybe, if I'm honest, to my family too. I looked down at my notes, then set them aside. I didn't need them. See, what no one tells you about carving your own path is how lonely it can feel. You look around, and everyone else seems to have a map, a ladder, a well-lit hallway to follow. And there you are, in the weeds, building something from scraps and stubbornness. I let the words settle. But here's the truth. There is no ladder worth climbing if it's leaning against the wrong wall. A quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. I built my life in the arts. I didn't do it for applause, or grants, or even legacy. I did it because stories matter. Because beauty and pain and memory are all things worth preserving. And because when people are told they don't belong, art reminds them they do. I paused, letting myself glance at my mother. Her eyes shimmered. "And after all that," I continued, "I finally realized something. You don't need everyone to understand your journey. You just need to understand it yourself." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, it was honest. Steady. Warm. After the talk, I stepped off the stage and found Mom waiting, holding her coat close against her chest. "That was," she whispered. "That was yours." "Yeah," I said softly. "It was." Alina hugged me next. "You looked at home up there." I nodded. I was. Dad wasn't there. I hadn't expected him to be. But later that night, as I packed up in the quiet of my hotel room, I got a text. A number I recognized but hadn't heard from in weeks. "Dad, you spoke well. Thank you for reminding me what I didn't bother to see." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, and smiled to myself. Whatever happened with him next was out of my control. And, finally, that was okay. Because I wasn't trying to earn anything anymore. Not pride. Not love. Not a seat at anyone's table. I had built my own. And I was done waiting to be invited in.